Biceps injuries in strongman. I keep receiving the question on why we are still seeing biceps injuries in the sport of strongman. So what I'd like to do in this video is take a look at some of the factors that might be contributing to the increase or the consistent or constant injuries that we're seeing. Then we're going to look at training, and we're going to look at a rehab protocol if you are unlucky enough to have one of these injuries occur to you. So what's the number one factor to seeing biceps injuries regardless of sport? The number one factor, in my opinion, is previous injury. If you've had an injury there already, the likelihood that you're going to get injured again is definitely increased. Now, with biceps, you can get tears at the shoulder or the proximal, or tears distally, so a further distance away from the center of your torso. The ones we see more often are definitely the distal tears, especially in strongman. This usually occurs because you're lifting heavy weights with a bent elbow. So the easiest way to avoid that is obviously to not lift heavy weights with a flexed elbow. You do see this in some events. I can give you a couple of examples of my athletes. Number one is Andrew Flynn, number two is Dan Benson. Both tore biceps, unfortunately. One was in a deadlift. It was in a deadlift at UK Strongest Man. It was, I believe, a Ukrainian deadlift, so they were lifting an implement on a chain. The platform was windy, the platform moved, Andrew had to move with it, adjusted himself, biceps pinged off. Ideally, you wouldn't be flexed in that position, you'd be keeping your elbow completely locked. Similar kind of thing happened with Dan Benson in the Farmers just before World's Strongest Man for him at under 90. And he was trying to accelerate hard into the Farmers. He's an under 90 competitor and he's trying to accelerate with 160 kilos in each hand. He flexed a little bit and then that popped off. These are both factors to tearing muscles. These are two movements where you wouldn't normally want your athlete to be flexing the elbows. The next most important factor is weak things break. This is a quote from Louis Simmons. He also said, you don't want to get strong in the wrong movement. We're going to look at these two factors now. So within strongman, I like to use ratios. I like to use predictor lists, and the predictor lists I use have been taken from the work of the late great Charles Poliquin, who had lots of different ratios and numbers. Now, what I would consider is the log is your 100% marker. Then you have different assistance lifts that come off that. Number one is the Scott bench curl with an EZ bar and a supinated or palm up grip. And then you've got an incline curl on around 40-degree incline, also with a supinated or palm up grip. You can do it semi-supinated, but the ratios I'm going to give you are for a supinated palm, because generally we are seeing issues at the biceps, not the brachialis. If we turn our hand to neutral, it's more brachialis. If we keep our hand palm up or supinated, it's going to be more tension through the biceps brachii. So the log's your 100% marker. Let's say you've got a 150 kilo log. In the Scott curl, you should be able to do 46% of that number, which in the maths for that would be a 69 kilo supinated Scott curl. And then with the incline curl, you're going to be able to do 33 kilo dumbbells, or that is at least your target. The athletes I see that first come to me are not close to these markers, which again, weak things break. Once the capacity of the tissue is exceeded, that is when you see people get injuries. No point getting strong in the wrong movement leads itself to where are the injuries occurring. So if they're occurring at the distal region, the incline curl is going to be more of a factor with these athletes. The next area I would look at are lifestyle factors, especially when you have an athlete that has an injury and it seems like it's out of the blue. It seems like their training's going well. They might be hitting the ratios, but what you can't see necessarily is their recovery. And I know we've got things like Whoop that can track all sorts of data, but the data is sometimes incomplete. So you're going to need this alongside blood tests, but no one's getting blood tests every week. So it's very, very challenging to stay on top of this. The first lifestyle factor that I'm going to bring to your attention that's really well known is going to be sleep. Sleep has to be high quality. The research on that is really, really clear. If you have less than 6 hours sleep, you are 4 times or 400% more likely to get an injury. And then between 6 and 7, it's 2 times or 200% more likely to get an injury. So sleep is of paramount importance for an athlete, especially someone that's going to be competing at the top level. Then looking at bloods, I'm by no means a blood expert, but I've consulted with experts, and we consulted with very high level strongman, or we consulted with a blood expert on a high level strongman recently because they were suffering from injuries and we wanted to see if there was any link. One of the things that this blood expert has seen is a lot of these inflammatory markers, for instance creatine kinase, up or increased, and that shows that the muscles are not recovering. It shows internal damage, and the reason, or one of the factors they're not recovering, is due to excessive gear use, and it's more to do with the anabolics not being cleared. If you're taking in anabolics and your body's not using them, they have to do something with them, and that causes a whole cascade of inflammatory markers to raise, which is then in turn giving you a higher predisposition to injuries. So let's circle back to training or periodization concerns. The main thing I see done maybe incorrectly within the sport or training of strongman is the fact that they're not training the biceps heavy enough. You're training heavy biceps in certain events and a lot of isometric movements like the stones or maybe sandbag carries or a Husafel or shield carry, but you're not training them through a full range to maximal effort. The reason I'm going on maximal effort, and what I mean by maximal effort is a high intensity of 1RM, that is the biggest predictor for tendon strength. The tendon takes 2 to 3 months to adapt to a higher load, and we're seeing more tendon ruptures, which is showing that the muscle is strong but the tendon is weak in these specific strongman case studies. So how do we train the biceps? First of all, we need a little bit of anatomy. So we've got the biceps, we've got long head and short head. Biceps, there's obviously 2 of them, hence bi. Below the biceps, we've got the brachialis. To get tension on the biceps brachii, we want a supinated or palm up curl. If we want to get tension on the brachialis, we want a neutral or hammer curl, or even a pronated curl. The biceps respond well, at least this is what my mentor told me and what I found in terms of training all my athletes, so my mentor being the late great Charles Poliquin. The biceps specifically respond well to faster tempos like 2-0x0. The brachialis though responds better to a slow tempo. Both are fast twitch fibers. Again, it shows you that the biceps need to be trained with lower reps. We're looking at 3 to 6 as opposed to just pure hypertrophy, which is probably going to lend more mass to the muscle belly and the cross section in the middle of the muscle, as opposed to the all important tendons, which is where the muscle is breaking down, as we said. So lower rep ranges, especially in curls, is going to lend itself to less issues in terms of tendon tears moving forward in the sport. Then you've got to look at the strength curves and which head of the biceps you're going to be putting more tension on. The easiest way to think about it is where is the upper arm in relation to the torso. So if your upper arm's in front of you, it's going to be more short head. If it's going to be, and obviously a top end of the strength curve, if it's going to be upper arm in line with your torso, it's a bit more of a middle of the strength curve and a spread between the two heads. But then if you put your upper arm behind you, like in an incline curl, then you're going to have more of the long head. Now, the issue in strongman is they can't perform the incline curl at a low enough angle to really target that bottom end of the strength curve where these injuries are happening. And the reason being is they lack shoulder extension. To fix this, you just need to use the movement. You just start at say 70 degrees and then you would move back say 10 degrees each set or each week depending on what you're able to do. So that incline curl, especially at the bottom position, say 40 degrees or even 30 degrees, is going to be really important to stress the strength curves and tendons we want to target for strongman. But again, the problem is they can't get there. You just need to inch there. Equally, you can do a reverse table on a bench or a floor and stretch out that shoulder extension so they can improve that marker. The other thing I would be looking through is obviously training through a full range. So we're looking at lower reps, heavier weight, and train through a full range. Locking the elbow out and back up. Not just going to a partial range. I want to be strong through a full range because you don't know what you're going to be doing when it comes to the strongman events, because it changes so much so often. Things are so awkward. We want to be prepared to be strong through every which way. So what does this look like in terms of programming? As I've discussed many times, the 2 main models of periodization that I use are the Norwegian model that I've popularized and then the conjugate model, which obviously Louis Simmons has popularized. Within the Norwegian model, I would be training biceps on one day and the brachialis on a completely different day. So we've got a palms up and then a neutral or palms down curl. More often than not, they're going to start at either 10 reps and work their way down each week, or 6 reps and work their way down each week. And we're going to have a variety of strength curves, meaning we're going to position their arm in a different position, whether it's the biceps or the brachialis day. So within that Norwegian block, we are going to be training the biceps for pure strength and with the goal of getting them stronger. Within the conjugate, it's more of an assistance movement, and we're going to be looking at different hypertrophy protocols. I like to periodize the assistance protocol as we go through the block, but generally you're going to be training them once a week, if at all. Often on the neural day where we've got the heavy push press, it could be log clean and press, then we're going to be looking at doing some strict press, and we could finish off with some biceps paired with some triceps. So that would only be once a week. I have in the past also used the strength day cure, or the 1 day cure. Again, Charles popularized this many moons ago. It's 15 workouts in 1 day. You're going to be very, very sore after that. But again, if you've got a massive weakness, sometimes using a supramaximal protocol such as the day cure can be of benefit. So let's talk rehab. What do you do when the inevitable has happened? First things first is you got to go to the surgeon and get your surgery. Let's pretend that surgery's done and the doctor has given you the all clear, because I won't do anything until a doctor has given the all clear, and I will be following their guidelines. The sequence that I put things in is to do with all of the strength qualities and contraction types, but there is a sequence I order things in based on rehab. First phase is going to be slow tempo. What do I mean by that? Is it's slow concentric and eccentric. What this does is it's going to reduce the weight and intensity, and it's going to allow the athlete to gain confidence, because if the doctor has cleared them to train, they are literally just weak, because they wouldn't clear them to train unless the tendon was on its way to being fully healed and it was safe for them to do so. The other thing, so when I say slow tempo, I mean 5 up, 5 down, or 5 up, 5 down, and maybe even a 5 hold at the top. I will also try to reduce the stress on the area. So if they have a distal injury, we will be doing things like prone or spider curls, where the top of the strength curve is going to get the most attention, the bottom, where the bottom of the strength curve is going to have less tension, therefore relieving tension on the distal tendon of the biceps. After that slow tempo phase is completed, which could be anything from 2 up to 6 weeks, or even 8 weeks, depending on the athlete, we would move into an eccentric protocol. They wouldn't necessarily be going into pure eccentrics, but it's going to be something that we progress them to. It could be that we do 2 weeks where they go 10 seconds down and up, and then it could be 1 final week where they would do eccentric only training. Again, the point being is they are weak at first, so the slow tempo will help build connections and confidence. Now the eccentric training is going to preferentially recruit and target tendons and different high threshold motor units. The other thing you need to be cognizant or aware of is you must be able to perform all movements and all strength qualities. So what do I mean by that? Is you need to consider fast movements. So the slow tempo movement, the eccentric movement, they're all very controlled. Then we need to consider faster movements. I like the myotatic strength or the repetition type for this. So the myotatic is essentially working and building and improving your stretch reflex ability. So you would lift concentric fast, you would control the eccentric to say 3/4, then you would bounce out of the bottom. And you can do this in any of the different angles and different strength curves that we've discussed already. End range banded is also another great option in terms of myotatic. So you would say pull the arm behind the body and then pulse for say 10 to 12 reps against the band to help improve elasticity at the tendon. With regards to treatment and therapy, after discussing in depth different biceps injuries that I've had, unfortunately, with my athletes over the years, the key variable is to start at the neck and work your way out. I wouldn't just start with biceps. I would be looking at neck extensions and thoracic. The reason being is the innervation at C5 to C6 happens here, and then the nerves go out to the upper arm. So by doing that, you are taking care of the whole kinetic chain and rebuilding connections from the spine, giving stability all the way to the end of the biceps.